Today, the 13th of May, 2025, marks the first day of the fifth year that has the NRM bending towards yet another electoral cycle. Now, this particular term, they said that they would secure your future. This morning, we get to make an assessment of the 4 years that has been so far. Has this future been secured by and large? Assessing the 4 years of the NRM sixth term, and yesterday, of course, marking the start of that fifth term, you get to see that in the final year, there's always preparedness for the next election, and therefore living out 4 years of service, there's definitely been a lot that has been in the works or not in the works, given the fact that the NRM government took an oath on the 12th of May 2021 to wreak charge of this country. Where are the hits and the misses of the commitments that they made to you as the Mna Uganda for these 5 years? Now, to help us dig deep into this, we have retired Major Paula Awit, Director for External Affairs with the National Resistance Movement. Good morning to you.
Morning, thank you, and greeting to our viewers and greeting to Honorable.
Honorable Samujunganda is also joining us. Good morning to you, Honorable.
Morning, and to the viewers and my colleague. We're at the university at the same time.
All right, let's start off with a look at the 4 years that have been Major Awit in regards to the national resistance movement. Reflecting on these years, can we really say and give credit to the NRM for a job well done from your assessment?
Yes, we have to give credits, but we should note that commenting in this kind of topic, it would involve a lot of figures, because if you had just tell the narratives, I would answer you that yes, there's a lot of credit to be given. But in each specific areas, if we are to go to detail, maybe at some point, it needs figures, because you have to cite, first of all, the manifesto commitments, and then what is done, and of course what is not done. So, but to answer, to be brief to your question, in the wide domain, credits deserved, because even by average, you know the percentage, over 80% of the percentage coverage. But as I said, each specific areas would need factual figures and achievement there too.
We'll be getting into the nitty-gritties of that. Honorable Samujunganda, who has been on the other side of the table, especially in Parliament. For the past 4 years of the 11th Parliament, you get to see that there's been a lot of controversies, a lot of debates that have left the House more torn than, and divided than in unison over some of the national matters that, the House has been able to deal with. In your assessment, what have these 4 years been like so far?
I don't know whether, and I'm sorry, you should not allow Awichi to first give us the figures. If he's not in a position, I'll give them. We say they need the figures, he doesn't give them. But let me give you the situation as it is. The National Bureau of Statistics issued a report after a census, and it gives the figures. First, you have 26 million Ugandans aged 14 to 64, who by our labor policy as a country are considered the working age. Only 9 of the 26 are in employment. That's according to National Bureau of Statistics. Only 9 million are in employment. 14 million are not working. If you go to the figures, because you need to have a calculator as you go through these figures, the National Bureau in their report says 13% of the population is without any form of employment. If you do the figures, that brings you to about 3 million. In the same report, National Bureau of Statistics says 14 million Ugandans do not have two sets of clothing. 14 million. Do you know what it means to have 2 sets of clothing? So you have only one shirt. If you go to dig, you wash it in the evening. The following day, you put it on. What the Awitchis are doing, each time the president goes to address the population, they will buy NRM t-shirts. When you see people in NRM t-shirts, for you, you think they are supporters. It is because 14 million Ugandans do not have two sets of clothing. 60% of the population don't have shoes. In Karamoja, it is at 80%. So these are the figures as given by the National Bureau of Statistics. 60% of the population is still engaged in agriculture. We are only doing irrigation at 2% of the 60. That's why 40% of the population in the country is either severely or moderately food insecure. It is in the report. Uganda receives the highest amount of rainfall in the world. We have water bodies almost at our doorsteps. Irrigation is at 2% of the 60 that are engaged in agriculture. If you go to the young people, younger people between 18 and 30, if you want to speak about the youth, 10 million Ugandans are aged 10 to 30. A highest percentage are neither in employment nor in school. And you can go back to the figures as they release exams. You start P1, about 2 million. By the time of PLE, less than 700. By the time of Senior 4, about 300. By the time of Senior 6, 100. Uganda has only 1.7 million people. Mind you, we are 45.9 million people. Only 1.7 have some qualification. Those who have degrees, 400,000. Those who have a diploma, no, those who have degrees are 600. Those who have a diploma are 400, and then the rest certificate. So there is no single policy of NRM that has delivered anything. And I'll give you the reason. Very simple. You don't need to be a mathematician. I am Shadow Minister for Finance. We are processing a budget for next financial year, a budget of 70 trillion. We have 390,000 people who are employed by government. We pay them a salary of 8.3 trillion. And then the facilitation in terms of vehicles and fuel, workshops, special meals is about 4 trillion. That comes to about 8 plus 12. And then if you read the report of the IGG, it says these people that we pay dearly, every year they steal 4 trillion. That's what IGG has said, public corruption. And then you have a budget. Last financial year, debt servicing was 36 trillion, which was 48% of the budget. So your half of your budget is servicing loans. A quarter is to pay public employees and their benefits. And I'm finalizing my response to the budget. Then they will pick 1 trillion, throw it at the population in terms of PDM, and the ones who earn 8.3 trillion facilitate themselves with 4 and steal another 4, will fuel their vehicle. As you have seen Mr. Museveni, that he has gone to check on the population why they are not getting wealthy. So the budget that we run in the parliament is not a budget to transform lives. It's a budget to reward loyalists and those who are in government. So that's why if you read the reports, including their own report, because there was a cabinet retreat, they're speaking about community roads that are impassable. Even the 60% that are involved in agriculture, community access roads are in bad state all over the country. It's a debate every day in parliament. So therefore, if NRM were to be a student in a class, they will now be repeating for the 10th year. They don't even have average marks to progress. That's why they have resorted to guns to stay in power. They must shoot at everybody, must abduct everybody, because on their own performance.
Before we bring in the issue of guns, and of course the statistics that are being shared by Honorable Semuju from the UBOS report, which covers 10 years roughly. And so those statistics are a picture of the last 10 years, which last 10 years have all been ruled by the National Resistance Movement. In the manifesto that we are currently running on, the NRM's focus was on securing the future, and this was through various initiatives, job creation, education, healthcare, and of course economic development being at the core of this manifesto. What are your defense statistics, which?
Well, that's why I had said that this needed the figures, which I have them. But the reply comes vis-a-vis the manifesto commitments, as you have rightly said. But of course, Honorable will make some overarching comment which comes in an obit that deserves a reply too. But I'm going to reply on jobs, irrigation that you said, which is in the manifesto, corruption and roads, which are also in the manifesto. But the other overarching comment that may need a reply, because it may mislead the viewers, is on the support for NRM. That it says that when you buy T-shirts and you think there's support. You see, even when we put our numbers at 20 million, people were doubting, especially for us at the Secretariat who did it. But President Museveni went to his voting station and verified and found that on average at where he went for this recent structure election at the village, if that is the average, of course others can go down, or I mean up or down, that would still validate us to that membership. Now, about the other support, we have found that even for a fact that the recent structures, people were fighting for our flag and dying. And I'm sure there are some parties who will need, even at a parliamentary level, who will beg people, please, John, hold us the flag. Peter, can you kindly get us our flag? Alex, and so on and so forth. But for us here. So we are now facing a problem, like you have to industrialize, but as you industrialize, you get a problem of pollution. So as we persuade members to join the parties, we now face a challenge of managing the democracy. So I really want to assure the public that the support was demonstrated in our primary election everywhere. And therefore, we now have the, like you have to industrialize and face pollution, we are faced with how do we manage the numbers that we are persuaded. Now, on the question of jobs, it's easy here. In the period under review, because we did a review of the manifesto commitments, the direct employment opportunities registered during this implementation was 1,259,275 jobs, computed from the various sectors. Now, again in the same domain, UDP was capitalized with 1.5 trillion as of March 2024. And this goes into manufacturing and other sectors. So cumulatively, the list of formal jobs has grown to 3.4 million, while informal jobs was created also by the Myoga and the rest. With these initiatives, therefore, 13,600. So these are figures compared to what you had. So those are figures on job. Now, figures on irrigation. Government has installed 16,600 small-scale irrigation schemes to various farmers across the country. And the irrigation has now expanded to 22,000 acres, which is a big significant increase from 22,500 in the 2021. So irrigation is well, because Honorable says that there's
I'm not the one saying.
It is robust.
I don't know how robust, but here I have a figure. Now, on corruption, that Honorable also mentioned, it is worth mentioning here on the time of review. The time of review in the corruption is that there's a good in the corruption in the manifesto commitment. Of course, we are committed to that. Now, in the time of review, government intensified the anti-corruption efforts that led to recovery of 81 billion shillings and United States Southern 16,000.
But if the IGG says 4 trillion is stolen, and you
talk of the commitments, and this is
what has been recovered, and where it has gone.
And is also over 877 prosecutions have been made. resulting into 355 interdictions and 293 convictions and 51 public officials barred from public office for the 10 years. Now, further 10,000 complaints worth investigating 787 billion under investigations. So in other words, if we make a commitment that we are fighting corruption in the manifesto, do we have figures and facts to show that, yes, we have done it? And this is the figure. As to whether you have achieved 100% or what, that is another one. But at least we are here saying we have figures to show that in our committee on corruptions, this is what we have. Finally, on road, the Honorable talks about road. I also want to bring the viewers to what is our commitment on road and how far did we go. Now, on roads, the commitment on roads is very, very impressive. We are, right now, Uganda is a roads.
For the district levels?
Yes, but overall, the commitment of roads are very thin. You can now move from the border of Sudan to Rwanda on tarmac. You can equally move from the border of Congo to Kenya on tarmac. And new roads under the commitment, like in Kapchora, has been done. Those ones particularly falling under the commitment. But the length and the width that I'm saying includes Priya. Therefore, on commitments of road, as Honorable is saying, we have figures to demonstrate that, yes, in our social contract with the people, in our manifesto, because the manifesto is the basis of a social contract, this is what we can prove, and this is what we are telling the people. Figures don't lie.
All right. Honorable, your people that you represent in Chira municipality, with these figures that have been shared, what are the realities that are in your own area of jurisdiction?
You see, the trouble is that NRM people create their own alternative facts, get their people to memorize them, repeat them 1,000 times to make them look like they are correct. Even if you want to go to the figures of the jobs it's giving, in Uganda today we have 2.7 million people who own bank accounts. People are paid, he says 3 million. All the formal jobs are paid through banks. Bank of Uganda says we have actually UBOS says we have 2.7 million who own bank accounts. Bank of Uganda in a recent survey says of those that are in formal employment, only 0.9, less than 1%, earn a million shilling and above. Those who earn 150,000 and below, you mean 5,000 can feed a family and you pay school fees for your children. That's why MPs, almost all MPs are stressed. We are the ones paying school fees, paying hospital bills, because even the hospitals themselves, if you go to employment, and again using their own documents, if you look at the budget, you go to Morago, at the moment Morago is staffed at 49%. If you go to State House, the president now employs 1,600 people, including 90 cooks. I don't know how many times he eats a day. And these are on the payroll, because the requirement under the Public Finance and Management Act, that as you table a budget in Parliament, you must accompany it with an asset register and a list of your employees. So your president has 92 cooks. Morago Hospital has no nurses. They're operating at 49%. You are going to speak about health. So Awichi, these figures that you have created and got everybody to memorize, they make you look funny, especially a person like you. We went to school together. You are more intelligent than these figures suggest. So that's where we are as a country.
Okay. So
so that they will cook figures, memorize all of them that are deployed on TV and radio. They will tell you from border to border. I mean, look at Ginger Road. This is the northern corridor, taking goods from Kenya. How many hours do people spend between? We lose more than $1 trillion shilling in traffic jam every year. Anyone working...
Which traffic jam has been increased by the new traffic lights within the city center alone?
Ginger Road, the main route into the country bringing goods. From Boyogere to Mukono, the road is bad, but it will take you ages. From there to Ginger, I don't know what Tamaka you are speaking about, maybe in design. So even the roads that were initially done have all broken down. In Ichira, see the dust The level of private investment is growing almost at 80%. The level of infrastructure, a responsibility of government, is growing at 0.1%. So that's where, as a country, that's why I said earlier that if NRM were to be a child in a school, they would be repeating every year, just growing in the body.
Okay.
So that's the only achievement that they can present to the population.
As the alternative government, which areas of focus would you actually, be paying attention to in this time and era to see a holistic growth and development, both economically as well as socially? We
have made proposals, and I want to repeat some of them, starting with the budget allocation. In this budget, you have nearly 7 trillion shilling. Every year, you are spending 900 billion shilling on buying fuels for government employees, those who have vehicles. These days, they like Nigerians, each minister a convoy. You are buying cars every year at about 160 billion and then maintaining them at about 100. So in a year, you are spending 1 trillion shilling just on transporting people who are privileged. But you are spending 1 trillion in PDM. Our view is that the starting point, you do what the Kenyans have done. The Kenyans, their employment public policy now is that you employ more technical than support staff. And then you save money. We have 8.3 trillion in wages. You can save 3 trillion there. You can go on the privileges you give to government people and save another 4. Invest that money in agriculture. There are markets in the Middle East. We cannot be a country exporting maids. I have been in the Middle East. You go to Saudi Arabia, you go to Dubai, you go to Oman, you now find Kenyan mangoes in their supermarkets, mangoes from Pakistan and all other perishables. Uganda is exporting maids. Why don't we invest heavily in agriculture, where we have an advantage, where you have 60% of the population, increase on the percentages of irrigation, and then constantly begin to supply, because Middle East, they have a lot of money, but they can't grow these things because of their climate. Kenya has done, if you go, for example, in London recently, Kenya has constructed facilities at the airports, refrigerated. They are investing in research. The other day I visited the former Minister of Finance, Gerard Sendaola, who has a farm in Wamagwa in Rakai. And he told me his biggest nightmare is research, because he said, I am selling beef to the UN in Congo, but I have quick maturing animals that when they come into contact with the grass, they become blind. I need research which I don't have. All the crops from coffee to everything are hit by diseases. This government is sleeping. They just manufacture figures and then come on TV and say we are doing very well. 60% of your population in agriculture, only 2% is doing irrigation. You have markets. You don't have to go to Europe. Just go to the Middle East. Saudi Arabia alone has a provident fund of more than $1 trillion US. So is Kuwait. So is what we have exported 2 million maids in these Middle East countries who are crying every day.
Exporting
so we will, if we are in charge of this country, reduce on the privileges of those who work for government, invest that money in agriculture, invest, because I have told you Morago operates at 49%. You go to university, the cable system, their staffing level is at 10%. But you go to State House, you go to President's office, you go to Prime Minister, you go to which, because even NRM Secretariat, we are the ones funding it. They just pick money and go and fund themselves. They have turned the State House into their headquarters, go and flush our toilets and eat our food. All that money can be saved, reinvested, and then gradually you will have Uganda now exporting agricultural products like Kenya is doing, Pakistan, etc. Eventually you will have jobs, not figures, because for them they have figures, the jobs are not there.
So what Honorable Semujju is actually debating is the pace at which your priorities are actually moving, and it's not a pace that is desirable in terms of moving Bana Uganda from subsistence farming to economic farming, as he's making reference to. Where are the difficulties that the NRM has found in actually implementing satisfactory some of the elements and areas of focus in the manifesto?
Well, first of all, we implement the social contract that we had with the people, and we evaluate ourselves. And challenges there too, we stated. Like even here, we have challenges there too, we stated. But allow me make some comments on what Honorable raised. Honorable insists on facts that NRM manufactures and memorize. First of all, me being a lawyer, I don't memorize. Maybe some cadres do. Because we have a saying in law that a good lawyer is not the one who crams things, but knows where to get it. Mm-hmm. So among cadres who memorize, Honorable, it does not include me.
It wasn't specifically
and that is why,
to you. I was just giving you the general picture.
And that is why I come with a document to refer to, because I don't believe in memory. Two, Honorable himself actually asked you that before I bring my figures, he wants to bring his figures. So he's happy to bring his figures, but doesn't want me to bring mine.
They are not my figures.
All right, yes. So let's talk about the challenges.
I want to request next time, you come here with the UBOS report, Bank of Uganda survey, you make reference to official figures, not your own figures.
And that's what I'm saying. You see, the domain of research and report by UBOS may not pick the figures that is. For example, if you ask UBOS about what I'm saying, you know, UBOS has a thematic concern of the themes, the areas they're investigating. So it is not this one. So if you compare UBOS report with what I'm saying, you find a lacuna, because the thematic concern of their research does not include this. And this is why we bring ours. It is absent in their report. So their thematic interest is not the thematic interest in the manifesto. Now, about the quality of jobs, of course we don't have all this time to bring jobs, the number of jobs and the quality. But like Honorable says, if you want it at another stage, you can even qualify by these jobs created, what is the scale, who earns what, that is there, but we don't have the time. So the jobs, but suffice to say that jobs are being created. The detail can be for another day. Now, there's also a comment about exportation of maids in the Middle East. We need to understand the genesis of this phenomenon, because if we don't, people seem to think it is an NRM creation of poverty. That has a lot to this. The thing is, the world lives in an imbalance of labor. That is why United Nations came up with a convention called Convention on Migrant Workers. It is a world-governed thing. If you went to Germany, I sat in German bus, and I was the youngest. The oldest was 65 years. Mm-hmm. So there is imbalance in labor in the world. That is why United Nations came with a convention on migrant workers. It's not a Ugandan thing. For example, Philippines exports 11 million nurses abroad. Mexico exports 11 million workers to United States. And that is why Mexican acted a movie saying 1 day without Mexican in America. Because they're saying Americans are proud, let's see them, should we withdraw our labor? Therefore, the issue of labor export, Uganda export the least compared to Kenya and Tanzania. We can go into quality. For example, we are talking Filipino exporting 11 million nurses. That can be debated. But the concept, the thinking that the exportation of labor abroad is a Ugandan and an NRM inability is not sustainable, because imbalance of labor in the world is there, and that is why a United Nations came up with a convention. So laws are brought to address.
It may not be the case of NRM, but it is within the confinement.
Labor migration is a global dimension. It is well over, and that is why there's a convention.
Migration of people and labor moving to other. The quality is what the debate is about.
That one can be discussed, but then it depends on the demand in a particular area and what you can produce.
Which demand, Honorable, say there's more demand that we can milk from in the Middle East than actually sending our boys and girls to do small jobs.
Now, that is a standalone topic on about the export, the manifesto implementation commitments towards that, which I can address later. But your question was the challenges that we are meeting towards the implementation. The challenge is obvious. honorable seats in parliament, part of the challenges, honorable knows it, in the form of resource envelopes. There are many commitments that we would want to do. For example, the PDM would want to cover as more as we can, but we can't because the resource envelopes in the parliament where honorable sits is not enough. So that is one clear challenges that we meet. But the other challenge is that there are some which are structural, that you need to do this before you do the next. So even if you wanted to do the next, you must of necessity have done this stage to move there. So the challenges are understandable, and for us we are honest and saying, even where we have not met the commitment, because it is our commitment to the people, it is our social contract, it is us who sold to the people, who marketed to the people, and it is us to complete it and to meet it. In any case, the democratic 5-year cycle is around the corner. If we don't, what do we tell the people?
Okay. All right. Honorable Semujju would also like to make assessment of something else that has been very big in this 5-year term for the NRM, and that was the direction they decided to take, the fiscal policy, cutting down on a few elements, merging MDAs in the name of cutting down on government expenditure. What are the realities on ground as we speak today?
First of all, I supported the rationalization. I still do. The trouble is that like all the policies, whether it is UPE, whether it was privatization, the objective are very attractive, but the implementation, it is the NRM style. Because as Parliament was debating rationalization, merging of government entities, the president was recruiting 350 RDC, assistant RDCs. Each will need a pickup, a policeman, a driver, a secretary. Those are 4 people. And then you ask them, you guys, so what was this rationalization meant? Even when you go to the figures themselves, in terms of salaries, because they didn't do any study, they are dreaming like Idi Amin and then announce a policy the following. I'll give you an example. UWEC in NTV was merged with Wildlife Authority. That entity was employing about 26 people. When they merged it with the Wildlife Authority, which was paying higher than UWEC, the salaries of everybody at UWEC went up. Then they came to Parliament to ask for more money. No study was done. And that happened with agencies that went to join National Planning Authority from population and so on and so forth. Because the NRM, because they don't have standards, they just do things the way they see them. You will find the government, I chaired the committee on COSASE in Parliament 2014-2016. And one of the recommendations I made was that you cannot employ an MD in national water, an MD in UNRWA, and an MD somewhere else, and you pay them differently, even when they have the same qualifications. They do that across agencies. So the merger itself has now created a demand, and that's why I told you the wage bill now is not going down. It is 8.3, it was 7.9, and it will continue growing. And because the agencies merged, as I said, a number of them were paying lower salaries. Now they have gone the allowances, the requirement of vehicles, and so on and so forth. But the rationalization, I've told you, Kenya did a human resource study, audited, and then said, this is now the policy. More technical, less support staff. You employ, I am writing a response to the budget, I'm asking them, a younger man like Major Awich, I think we should be of the same age, in a poor country that relies heavily on loans, why should I employ him and he works between Nigeria and Kampala and I give him a driver? These ministers with the 10 soldiers, not because of security, but because they want to show they are powerful. Ministers with 3 vehicles, some have 4. All of them for what? This country has less than 308 ambulances. You saw recently a picture of a patient being taken to hospital in Honorable Musasi's constituency on a bed like a stretcher. I mean, don't these images hit you guys who are in government? So therefore the policies, NRM does not have bad policies, I can assure you. Because first of all, they don't originate them. Some of them are global. You just speak from another country's experience, and then you seek to implement. their implementation is zero. That's why I've told you, read the budget. It will tell you what they are doing. Because the budget should show you what the government intends to do and how they intend to fund it. In this budget, it has become an allocation to friends, family, and the other day I was looking at Mufti Mubaji. After selling Muslim properties and they are auctioning Uganda Muslim Supreme Council, now Museveni says we pay his debt, 14 billion in the budget. You pay Magola, you pay Amina, you pay... So really, it is stressful to be going through the NRM budget in Parliament because the critical issues where they should be directing funding, they don't. But if they have friends who can go and rob Museveni, then they will put an allocation for them. So the fiscal indiscipline, even the budget itself, if you read documents from Minister of Finance, they are including this year, if you read the debt sustainable report, please stick to the budget, stick to the budget. Each budget is going to be altered to meet political demands. So as a result, even what is stated as fiscal, because if you want, you can judge them by the Charter of Fiscal Responsibility, to which they committed they will not do the following. Look, we borrow money, we don't utilize it, and we pay interest. This financial year we are in, we are going to pay interest on money borrowed from commercial banks here, worth 11 trillion in interest. We are going to pay interest this financial year, 9 trillion. On loans we are not utilizing. These guys are sleeping. The other day we borrowed money from African Development Bank to do the Ginger Expressway Southern Bypass. $300 million for 3 years. That money is not utilized. You are paying commitment fees, because if you go to borrow money and you don't utilize it, the lender will require you to pay commitment fees for the money to stay on the account. We have 14 trillion money borrowed is lying idle on account, meant to do roads for the last 5 years. That money is not utilized. When you ask them, they say at the time of borrowing, we had not done designs.
So this is to say, in line with the fiscal policy that we started with, in as much as the principle is good, but the implementation is not working out to benefit the cause for which it was intended to. You do have Major Awit. I would like you to respond to that. What have been, from where you are seated as the NRM, what have been the hits and what have been the misses when it comes to the fiscal policy?
First of all, there is the issue of the restructuring, which Honorable says is supported, and I thank him for that, because we really thought that that should be done. And as he remembers, when I say we, I mean the party, because we held meetings several times as a movement caucus. I sit in movement caucus because I'm a director. You may wish to know that movement caucus is an organ of the party, just like women league, youth league, or what is in the constitution. So we try to persuade the honorable members in the caucus to have this done, and I'm happy that honorable shared our views. And of course, talking about the figures associated to that, from the 40 bills that were presented, 23 were passed, while 17 were still pending at the time of review. Now, the money which was saved was 906 billion.
There is no money saved. Again, your figures.
The savings were that, and if Ubos is doubting that, because you are
it's not Ubos. I am in Parliament doing a budget. We need more money to pay salaries.
So,
no saving.
At least my figures show that. Now, importantly, what Honorable is raising now is emerging challenges after that. You see, in real life, even in laws, when you pass a law, you presume that it will work. But when you put it to test, cracks and challenges emerge. And that is why there's provision for amendment. Now, if we restructured and emerging challenges are there too, for example, in the specific case he gives to wildlife and
Wildlife Education Center.
In Entebbe. If such emerging issues do come up, we don't live in a hard and frozen world. We are flexible to make remedies too. But the bigger goal is a rationalization. The emerging issues there too can be addressed. And that shouldn't be really an issue that fails us. Because as I gave the example of a law, even if you pass a law and all of you agree in unison in Parliament, give it 3-4 years, even the same Parliament will see a crack.
Okay, all right.
So,
still on that element, he did make mention of the fact that the wage bill instead seems to be increasing, especially into the next financial year. What remedies are you going to apply as the government in power to actually cap on that?
There could be, for example, there's provision like what you call the policy principle, the government approved the public service pay policy principles. Okay, those pay policy principles can be revisited. There's what is called policy pay principles, which is done by public service. So one of the remedies there is to revisit this pay principle by public service and see how to remedy it in conjunction with a view to achieving the goal that was intended. So it is a simple, it's just a policy principle by public service.
All right, so
yes.
and then the question comes in that when would that be put into consideration?
Policy matters are always done their time frame. You can either have a 1 year time, which is you do it through budget planning, okay, annual budget, or you do a 5 year. Like this policy pay principles, there's one which was done for a 5 year period. Now, the timing of when you want to do it, you choose. Should you want to, if you think you have the resources and the timing to fix in a policy statement on an annual basis, you can do it. But if you do it in 5 years, it is. Okay. But the point here is that, is it identified as an emerging issues, as Honorable does? Right. And that is why we have opposition members of parliament to raise such views, to raise if we don't see it. But we should be able ourselves to also see it, that we have rationalized. You see, as I told you, even if you do pollution, you get emerging, you do industrialization, you get emerging issues like pollution. So this shouldn't be a big thing. Now, your other question, I was answering this, you had asked a question on where I'm sitting. Say it again. The
hits and the misses so far that you have realized as the NRM government with that rationalization.
No. This rationalization, as I said, it was done in good faith with an objective. And I said we are open to see emerging challenges, like things which are not done. Because you can't really, I gave the several examples of laws. These emerging issues can be addressed in pay principles. That is done with public service. And that could be easily done. And it doesn't even need a legislation. It can be done administratively. As a matter of policy, you don't even need to go back with it to parliament to say, okay, we have emerged this and we have found salaries are so high. It doesn't need, it's not a constitutional matter. It's not a legislative matter. That can be handled as a policy.
Another element that the current manifesto has been so focused on and has had the president moving up and down the country is the parish development model and seeing how effective it is at grassroots level. Of course, it's one that when enrolled out, it had so many loopholes that led to corruption and loss of funds and misuse and abuse of offices down to the parish level. But that being said, now where it stands, the NRM says some of these elements were rectified through the different authorities and today should be a better picture. 4 years down the road, Honorable Samuju, the parish development model, has it been successful?
You see, any policy or decision of government that will take money to people will be welcomed by politicians. Because if you didn't, your people would complain. People are happy to receive the money. But as I said at the beginning, many of these things are preceded with no studies. The Auditor General, in one of his recent reports, he said, first of all, we needed to collect data as to who is in the subsistence, agriculture, and any other form of employment that is of a subsistence nature. And the Auditor General said compilation of that data was at 70% when PDM was rolled out in 2020. The Auditor General in a subsequent report said more than 2,000 circles that received PDM, they have no known location, not even a signpost, but they had received. Others, no training had been done. In my own constituency, there is very limited subsistence agriculture. They brought money in the village where I am, in Wukasa, in where you get it, gave money to a lady because they give 1 million. The lady bought some goats. And she was required to begin, because you see, this money is a fund. You borrow and then you begin paying interest. Because so far now, we have spent about 3.4 trillion. In this financial year, another 1 trillion has been budgeted. But as I said earlier, like UPE, the idea is good that you want children to be in school. The success is not in the numbers that you have registered on day one. The success is in completion. Our assessment should not be, and usually that is how NRM marks itself. They will tell you, because the UBO says 800,000 people have so far received the PDM, because they target one person per household. Mm-hmm. And we have 10.6 million households in Uganda, but 800 have so far received. The achievement should not be in who has received. The achievement should be in a transition, who has left subsistence farming and now hands money. I saw the president last evening visiting a lady in Kasese with a half-constructed house. And these are the images of a president who wants to transform a country. You visit a lady with a half-constructed house, and he takes photographs with the pigs, with the chicken, with the eggs. So there is no success, as far as I am concerned, to report, because it will be a miracle, first of all, that in 2 years you have had people transforming. But again, the assessment must be done figures, because already people were, by their own actions, transiting some from subsistence to what the NRM likes calling money economy. So if you want to measure the success of PDM, you first discount the percentages of those who are transiting every year, mm-hmm. and then the additional number that has been caused by PDM. I have seen none in my constituency. I want her which take me to a village in Ichira, and he presents to me people who have transited from poverty as a result of PDM. But like other initiatives, whether it is Myoga, whether it is Ntandikwa, whether it is everything, our people will be happy to receive the money. But I have told you, women who go to work in Azam, in steel and tube, they earn 5,000. When you give them 1 million shilling, the first thing will be to go and pay school fees. I have many who knock my door every day. My child wants to register for senior 4. My child, his results is being withheld. So this money comes in that form. What other countries do, and I'll give you an example, during that same recession, what UK did was to ask industrialists, people who have jobs, to employ people, and government was paying them for 3 months. They said once a factory realizes value in these people, they will now take them on going forward. Mm-hmm. But what these people are doing, are you poor? It used to happen in my village. You go to a function, because in a village you eat meat and chicken when there is a function. So they don't have enough, so they pick the little that is there and throw at you and begin fighting over it. And then they say, we have served children. It is exactly what they are doing, and I'm making a response in the budget.
One of the other things, Honorable, that has come through the PDM is corruption. We continue to see a lot of corruption emerging out of the different initiatives and programs that the NRM is putting up. In principle, they are good, but why do we have continued corruption as one of the emerging issues?
Because you see, these things are not transparent. Once you have because even the village, let me start in the villages, where you have NRM chairpersons and some of the chiefs, they are the ones who are responsible for choosing who benefits. So I give you 1 million, you give me 200,000. I saw that in the Youth Livelihood Fund in my constituency. They were giving up to 10 million. But those who are approving you to get the 10 will want 2. Because corruption is another undeclared NRM policy. Under Idi Amin, at one time, I saw even in South Sudan at the moment, when they give you a gun, you don't ask for a salary. You go on the road and begin looking for the money. It used to happen under Idi Amin. So in NRM, when they give you a job and you don't steal, they think you are stupid. So everybody given a job by this government, the first thing in a village to say this guy is wise depends on how much you have stolen in the shortest time possible. So all the NRM cadres have been now taught that when money comes, please find a way of stealing it. You remember one time we even had a minister who was stealing masts Immediately she got appointed in charge of information. So it is a culture that has been now cemented. The moment you are NRM, you are distinguished by how much you steal in the shortest time possible. So PDM, those credit facilities, as I said, they need to be preceded by a study. They need to be administered transparently. They need to be, standards ought to be set. Let me tell you, I was 12 years old when Mr. Museveni came to power. At that time, Museveni was distributing tractors and Tata trucks. But what was the principle? He was encouraging production. In fact, on all the Tatas, the word produced for export used to be written there. And he used to go to successful farmers who needed the trucks and he would give them. He would, in my sub-county where I was born, there were 2 tractors. He came to the distinguished farmers and they were the ones responsible for running tractors.
Okay.
Recently in the operation with the creation, I have a neighbor where I was born. He's into animal farming and so on and so forth. When they went to register for the animals being distributed under operation with the creation, they were not given. They looked for some NRM fellows who have never looked after a cat, gave him a Frisian which died in 2 months. Because, I mean, there is no country on earth.
So that is to say that they serve themselves first before they can serve the rest of the country. Isn't that what the president
said, that operation with the creation corrupts because people complain that they are serving themselves? He said it himself. He said, now I am bringing money to you.
We get to see corruption continuing to be an issue, not just for the PDM, but for all the other NRM, initiatives that are being implemented. Why is that the case?
Well, I had picked also to respond on the issue of corruption, particularly in PDM. But allow me comment on measurement of success, because Honorable seems to say that money is given out and people are willing to get it and happy to get it, but there has not been a clear methodological approach for success. There is. And remember, this program is also in its infancy stage. Now, there are those who get the money and invest in things that may not produce results and impact on him immediately. So it is work in progress. But also on top of that, they are already research.
Let him first make his defense, then you'll come in. Honorable Samujo, we give you time to have your defense. Let him make his defense. Thank you.
Therefore, already research has been done to assess the impact. And again, we may not have the time to state it here all, but effects are there. The change, the positive effect. But also, we should note that it's a long-term progress. So it is not true that there's no progress. Of course, there's misuse of money in many instances, which we really tried to put an inbuilt system for people to mitigate that. You wouldn't be surprised if, like Honorable cites the example of somebody gets it and pays fees. So those challenges are there, and the inbuilt system, the Secretariat has built measures to mitigate it. Now, on the issue of corruption, and I will handle it with a culture of theft that Honorable alleges in the NRM, particularly corruption in PDM. The president in particular has been very, very strict, to the extent that he even issued that police bond should not be given. You know, under the Constitution, you have police bond up to 48 hours. After 48 hours is the limit. But tendencies have been that somebody is a parish chief, for example, is accused of misappropriating the parish development money. And when the parish chief comes to the police, he makes a statement and goes home. Now, the president has been strict on that please, accusation with evidence, don't give police bond. He has even gone as far as don't give bail. And again, here I need to clarify. Some people think bail is a right. Bail is not a right. People only have a right to apply. You have a right to apply for a bail. You don't have a right to bail. So all these instructions, the president has said, if the prosecution has adduced evidence that and the parish chief has stolen this money, please, that bail application should be, let him apply as his right, but hold it. So All these are mitigations that were put in place to mitigate challenges on corruption on PDM. Because money is money. Anybody will be tempted to do this. We are not using machines. We are using human beings. And these human beings, the only way you can guard is the institutional frameworks. Institutional frameworks. Now, finally, on the culture of theft, Honorable alleges that it's now a culture that if you're in NRM, you're given a job, you have to. I don't think so. Because I have just read prosecutions that have taken place, convictions that have been secured. Now, if this was a culture, then we wouldn't have the figures of prosecutions, securing convictions and all that.
I think the argument would be in the figures that you presented don't tally with the realities on ground of how much corruption is actually not being handled in the name of the fact that some of these perpetrators are actually NRM people. But that's a subject for another day.
But that is what I'm saying. If that is the culture, do you build a culture and go ahead and build institutional framework to counter the culture? It doesn't make sense. The institutional framework to counter the perceived culture of corruption would be that you don't have IGG, you don't have the courts, you don't have prosecution, you don't have police. But we have had IGG, we have had prosecutions, we have had anti-corruption court. Maybe Honorable could consider anti-corruption prison to show the commitment. Because if you have the anti-corruption court, then where are the convicted going to be? In ideal, there is even anti-corruption prison. So it is not true that the culture is there.
All right.
Personally, I have not stolen anything. Honorable knows. If that was a culture, I should have been grown in it, because as he says, I was with him at the university when I'd been already in the army. I came from military school as a lieutenant. I was promoted a captain in Makere University when I got a degree in law. I came from Makere with a degree in law and a captain. Now, I should be one of those who grew up in that culture, but what have I stolen? Or you think I'm not exposed to it?
That being said,
culture, you cannot say there's a culture of corruption in the NRM, which is, you know, culture means a practice which is acceptable. Right. But you can't accept it when you go ahead and build institutional framework.
I'm glad you've used the word acceptable, because the government in power seems to continuously accept corruption.
That's why we build institutions to fight it.
Yes, you have institutions, but you also have authority to actually make sure that these institutions to get resources in order to fight the corruption. But the institutions you're talking about are constantly complaining they're not able enough to fight the corruption that you are talking about. But that being said and done, Honorable Samuju, as the opposition, we do have another round of elections that gives the opposition an opportunity to put the NRM government out of power and bring in the alternative government that seems to present better alternatives that can quicken social and economic development for our country. What are the opportunities that lie ahead?
You see, we have institutions to fight corruption, therefore it's not a culture. Same with the elections. You have institutions to preside over elections. You also what happened in Kawempe. Was that institution not there? Overrun by the military. Armored vehicles at polling station. The law says you can't even carry an AK-47 at a polling station. The law provides for a police constable who may even come with a baton or even with no baton. Because the Constitution says elections must be free and fair. People must vote in an atmosphere, in a free atmosphere. Under NRM, we are voting at gunpoint. I don't know if he's proud of that practice. And Kawempe was just a rehearsal of what is going to happen, because you have seen Museveni's son who heads the army. He has said, you opposition, I'm going to beat you, because for us we are Tutsi. We are going to beat you. So we are preparing to be beaten. The struggle for democracy does not start and end with these elections. These elections is a round of opportunity for us, if we are not stopped, to mobilize the population to say the things that I am saying here that may not necessarily reach everybody. Because you have, the last time I counted more than 170 radio stations in Uganda. About 95% are owned by NRM politicians. If you go to speak on any of those radio stations, especially up country, either the RDC will switch off the generator. In the recent case where Dr. Wesje, who is now in prison, we had gone up country, we were asked to pay 1 million to speak. but it was refunded in the evening, and an apology issued. We can't have you. So these elections, as I said, it's just a round of an opportunity, like it has happened in many of them, when out of shame they can allow you to go and access the population, because on a normal day they will not allow you. You can only come here on NTV and then go home, and that's the only way you interact with Ugandans. Up country, one day I visited Chisoro, where the guy who had worked at our home for nearly 30 years, so he became part of the home. So I go to visit in Chisoro at Bonagana. So as I begin cooking pirao, 2 police patrols came and said, "Who gave you the permission to come?" I said, "You guys, is Chisoro in Uganda?" I called the people who were in police in Kampala. Eventually they didn't arrest because they had started confiscating phones. So they moved their patrols in their compound. We continued with the cooking, but we had become a nuisance. So the villagers started collecting around to see just a visit by Semuju in Chisoro is criminal. When you hear them declaring victories, they have ring-fenced some areas in Uganda where no opposition work cannot be done. I have gone with MPs in Karamoja. You first report to RDC, then to DPC before you go to access the population. But also, the gerrymandering Mr. Museveni has kept accusing Obote of doing. They continue. I've been giving an example to get up for everybody to listen. Karamoja, as a sub-region, has 1.4, you can average it to 1.5 million people with 26 MPs. 1.4 million people, 26 MPs. Wakiso, 3.4 million, 9 MPs. All of them opposition. So in the areas where the opposition is dominant, they will make sure that there are few administrative areas. So the parliament will be largely an NRM to create an impression in the country that NRM is really supported. But I have told you in Karamoja, 1.5 million people, 26 MPs. Wakiso, 3.4, 9 MPs. Tororo district now with 9 MPs, I represent Chira, 500,000 people. But Tororo with 300,000 has 9 MPs. So this is how NRM, as I said, they really manufacture. If you ask him next time, he will come with a document on how they have NRM structures, everything, because they are very good. He will never come with an official document. They come with their coursework like documents, and then they present them. So we go into these elections just to continue battling for survival.
Which, as we are getting into this electoral cycle, I know that the NRM is preparing yet another manifesto. What are the commitments that you're focusing on for the next elections?
Commitments we are focusing on will be contained in a document we are making as a manifesto with its clear themes. So right now we are still reviewing what we promised the people, and we have already implementation. We have a committee drafting the new manifesto, so that will be our commitment. So I can't now say it at this time because there's a committee working on it. But surely it will encompass the ones which we have not completed. Now, it raises issues. You don't want me to respond to them?
No, you can respond to them.
Yes. Now, for example, on the election, whether it is a ritual or it is a ritual or it is a proper democratic process, it is. President Museveni has insisted on this, that elections, we must be democratic and be polite. You will remember his statements to the Army Council recently. But the thing is, even himself has always hinted that voting for Museveni is not a crime. It is your preference. So we're committed to a democratic election. Now, for example, I have given this example. If our colleagues think that election is rigged, really, the whole of West Nile, Acholi, Lango, Karamojo, Teso, the opposition don't have polling agents. And you know that in those districts, they have declared Museveni 70%, this one 30%. Why don't we then take the whole of 100 Okay.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of this discussion, Major Awich. Thank you so much for being with us. We also want to thank Honorable Samujunganda for this debate. We'll continue following up on some of these events as they keep unfolding here in Morning at NTV. Stephen Bida is going to be joining us later on. He's going to be on ground to speak to the people and hear what are the people's opinions and voices on the NRM manifesto for 2021-2026. Do stay with us.